Hi, this is Synthchaser from Synthchaser.com. I've got all the models of ARP Odyssey represented here, and I'm about to dive in and repair them. And before I did, I thought I'd show you briefly a look at each of the different models of ARP Odyssey, and then we'll explore whatever interesting issues come up as I repair them. I've already done a more detailed ARP Odyssey repair and restoration video, so if you haven't seen that one, you might want to go check that out. But while they're sitting together, I've got a Mark I white ARP Odyssey, I've got a Mark I black ARP Odyssey, I've got a Mark II ARP Odyssey, and a Mark III ARP Odyssey. This one looks very similar. The subtle difference you can see from the front is the power switch. This has got a wide power switch, and the Mark I black ARP Odyssey has a thin power switch like the white one. So here's our white Mark I ARP Odyssey, like the one that I did in that previous repair video. It's got the pitch bend knob. In this case, the pitch bend knob is missing, so we're going to have to replace that. And you'll notice that the only on the white ones, the transpose switch is kind of sticking up through the panel. On all other ones, only the little lever sticks up. Spinning around at the back, you can see this is a model 2800. This is the first revision of ARP Odyssey. Mark I ARP Odysseys are all model 2800. And it doesn't have as many jacks as there were on the back of later ARP Odysseys. You've just got a pedal, a portamento foot switch, and low and high level outputs. There's no CV, gate, or trigger input or output. By default, it can be added. This one is also a Mark I ARP Odyssey. Again, I mentioned the tell on this one is the power switch. It's got the narrow power switch, the same style power switch as the white Mark I ARP Odyssey. But otherwise, from the front, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So on the back side, you'll notice this is also a model 2800 ARP Odyssey. So it's a Mark I, and it has the same jacks that you find on the back of the white ARP Odyssey. So there's no CV, gate, or trigger. Here's the Mark II ARP Odyssey, the black and gold ARP Odyssey. I said the tell was the power switch. Also, if you notice the calibration ports for the oscillators, they're a little narrower. On the ARP Odyssey Mark I, there were little plastic hole plugs there to keep dust out of there. On the Mark II, they're just a little bit smaller and they don't need the hole plugs. So on the back side, we can see that this is a model 2813. There's a few different model numbers falling between 2800, which is Mark I, and 2823, which is Mark III. And when they're the black and gold style ARP Odyssey, and they've got the back panel that looks like this, all those different model numbers fall under the Mark II category. But I think in general 2813 is the one that I see the most of. So on the back we see it has the pedal and foot switch ports, the low and the high level outputs like the Mark I, but we have some additional jacks here. It's a CV input and output, gate input and output, trigger input and output. And the trigger is needed to properly trigger the ADSR on this, so you can't just connect gate and CV and expect the ADSR to be working properly. There's also an external audio input jack, so you can run things through the filter. And then finally we have the Mark III ARP Odyssey, or the black and orange ARP Odyssey. These have the proportional pitch control buttons instead of a knob. Some Mark II Odysseys, or even Mark Is, can have retrofitted onto it these three pads in place of the pitch bend knob. And then on the back we have the pedal and the foot switch jack. The low output is now the 1/4 inch output, and the high output is this unbalanced XLR. On the older ones, this was a RCA jack. The external audio input is also changed to a 1/4 inch instead of the RCA jack. And then we have the CV, gate, and trigger input and output like we do on the Mark II. So that was the boring part, just looking at the outside. This is the part that I like, where we'll open it up and we'll see what the differences are inside between the revisions of ARP Odyssey. So I'll take the circuit boards out in a minute and we'll look at those, but just looking at the underside here of the white Mark I, few things that are different on the Mark I than the later ones is that we have this style of key bed. So there's 1, 2, 3 bus bars. So there's CV, gate, and trigger. Whereas on later ARP Odysseys, there's 2 bus bars, CV and gate, and the trigger is detected from in the circuitry. One other thing on the Mark I that I think is kind of stupid, and I correct them when I work on them. So this is the power supply board here, and these wires are soldered to the power supply board, and they go up here to the power switch. The power switch is screwed to the circuit board. So basically, you either have to unscrew this. To remove the power supply, you have to unscrew this power switch and remove it, or desolder the wires from the power supply. What we're going to do is we're going to cut it here, and we're going to add a connector. So the power supply and or this board C can be removed without having to keep it coupled to the power supply. Here are the circuit boards out of the white Mark I. And there are 3 main circuit boards in the ARP Odyssey, and they're named A, B, and C. C's got the voltage-controlled filter, B's got the oscillator, C has the pitch bend, the transpose, and the keyboard control voltage memory. There were 2 revisions of each of these boards. So this is revision A1, B1, and C1. And typically the Mark I ARP Odysseys will have all first revision boards, but it's possible that someone's replaced a board, and the only way to find out for sure what revision board you've got is to take a look at it. Board B will just say board B, board B2 will say B2 on it. So you can see that on the back side right here. It says board B. So you don't need to actually remove the boards to see what you've got in there. Typically the Mark III ARP Odysseys will have all revision 2 boards, and the Mark II Odysseys can have a mix and match of it. Generally I find that they've got the A1, B1, and C2. But again, the only way to find out is to open it up and look at it. When we pull out revision 2 boards, I'll put these side by side so you can compare the differences. The A boards are fairly similar. The B board, the oscillators are different. So this is the older B board, B1, and the IC chips that the oscillators are based on are the CMOS 4011 chips. And then here on the filter board, you can see this has a 4023 voltage controlled filter, which is the 2-pole filter. Here we're looking at the bottom side of the black Model 2800, the Mark I. And you can see that it looks essentially identical to the white Mark I. It's got the 3-bus keyboard, and these boards are also all revision 1. Power switch is hardwired to the power supply. It's the same thing. So we'll take these boards out and set them aside as well. For perspective, I'm noticing a date code on the bottom of the key bed, October 11th, 1974. So that'll give you some idea of when this synthesizer was made. So here are the 2 Model 2800 synthesizer boards side by side. We have the Mark I white boards in the back and the Mark I black boards in the front. This IB is Mark I black, not irritable bowel. And I've labeled the boards, even though all these synthesizers in the video are mine, and if I wanted to, I could mix and match the boards. I do really want to keep the original boards and hardware and everything with the original synthesizer it came with, just because I'm weird that way. But these are all revision 1 boards, and you can see they look the same. It's the same schematic. The parts are all the same. So you have a Mark I, a Model 2800 white one. It's going to sound exactly the same as a Mark I Model 2800 black one, pending calibration and stuff like that. So you can see right now the white and the black 2800 is exactly the same. Here we're underneath the Mark II ARP Odyssey, the Model 2813 black and gold, and we can already see some differences. First of all, the keyboard, the key bed looks a little different, and the difference is that we've got a 2-bus key bed here, with keyboard control voltage and gate. The trigger is extracted from that. Also, our power switch is no longer bolted or screwed to the board C, and there's some quick connect terminals here, so you can actually disconnect the power supply without desoldering wires, or removing the power switch, or any of that business. So they got a little smarter with their design for manufacturing and design for serviceability as this went on. Also down here, coming to board A, we have an additional connector here that goes to these CV gate and trigger jacks on the back panel. I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but it looks like a date code of 1976 on the key bed. So I bought all these ARP Odysseys for parts or repair, with the intent to repair and resell them. But I haven't turned any of them on, and it doesn't make sense to turn any of them on until I've gone through and serviced them. But I can see here that a J wire has jumped to the other side of the bar and is stuck there. So that would definitely be a problem. If everything else were okay, that in itself would be a definite problem that would be causing this keyboard not to work properly. Another thing I noticed is, as I was unplugging this terminal, I noticed it was kind of wiggling like a loose tooth. And so now that I've got it out, I can turn it over, and I can see on the back side of the board that you can see it as well, the solder joint there for this terminal is cracked, so that's going to need to be repaired. I stuck a little bit of a little flag there to remind me. So this is the center of board B2, and while ARP got a little smarter with some of the things like the power cord, the power switch, they got a little stupider in other areas. So you'll notice that there's an insulating washer there. If we remove this screw, we will see that if we didn't have that there, the screw head would land and short this trace out to the case. They did that on a lot of synthesizers. I think ARP Omni 1. I think there's several locations where that happens, and that's unfortunate. So we'll mark that area to remind myself and anyone who goes there in the future that needs to have an insulating washer there. So I typically will put a little eye there with a Sharpie to remind myself and others. And here are the circuit boards out of the Mark II ARP Odyssey, the 2813. This has a revision 2 boards for all 3 boards. So this is an A2, and you'll notice there's a 4011 chip there that isn't on the older one. This is a board B2. The oscillators are based on instead of 4011s, they have 2 3086 transistor array chips there. And then this is the board C2, and unlike most Mark IIs, most Mark IIs I find have the 4035 filter, which is the Moog ladder filter. This particular one has a 4075 filter, and you can tell because there's a single IC chip on it instead of 4 IC chips. It's not encapsulated. Plus it says 4075 on it. I'll zoom in. It says 4075 there. Someone may have replaced this filter at some point, but basically with ARP Odysseys you have to look to see what you've got inside, because even if you have a Mark I that should have 4023, someone could have replaced the filter at some point. So yeah, we're kind of was expecting to see a 4035 filter in this, but we've got a 4075. And there's a broken slider there, there's a broken switch, and then the pitch bend pot shaft is broken. So we're going to replace that stuff. We'll replace all the sliders anyway, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So here's the inside of our Mark III ARP Odyssey, and first thing I noticed is the interconnect board. Looks like it's come off and it's wedged under the key bed. So again, I bought this parts repair. That definitely would be a reason why it wouldn't be working. I'm not going to put the board on and test it out I'm going to be servicing it anyway, and no good can come of turning it on while it's got the original 10 ohm capacitors and all that other stuff in it. So we'll resist the temptation to see if I got a good deal on a really actually not broken synthesizer. But some differences you'll notice. First of all, the case opens up differently. In general, this is a lot more serviceable than the previous ARP Odysseys. Unfortunately, the key bed is entirely, the keys are entirely plastic. The old ones have plastic caps on metal levers, and these keys are a little more easily damaged on the bottom side because the little stem that couples the J wire to the key is thin and made of plastic and easily breaks. But in here we can see that we've got revision 2 circuit boards. I'll pull them out so you can get a better look. So as I'm disconnecting stuff, there's a connector here for the proportional pitch control, but there's an additional wire that's run over here to a little terminal, and usually there's a really poor quality connector there that slips down onto this pin, and I guess it loses its tension or it breaks. It's very common that connector goes bad. So someone has soldered that to this pin. So I've cut it here, and I'm going to put a Molex, a wire-to-wire connector here, so these boards can be removed without soldering. I've pulled the key bed from the Mark III, and one cool thing about the Mark III is it has this little panel under the bottom of the case that you can remove a little black plastic bit that should have been there but isn't. So you can remove that, and then you can get under to adjust or clean key contacts without having to unscrew the key bed. So one problem that I have with the ARP Odyssey Mark III I tend to have is kind of unfortunate. The power supply, there are some screws that go through the bottom of the case into standoffs, which are kind of connected to the circuit board here. But the problem is, I'm going to turn the screw, start unscrewing the screw, and you can see that the standoff is just spinning. The circuit board is not, it's not fastened well to the circuit board. So it kind of, the fastener, the standoff breaks free from the circuit board and starts spinning, and you're in a situation where you can't unscrew that to remove the power supply. So for this situation, I've had to go out and get long forceps, which I can then reach under here and clamp on to that standoff, and then from the back side I'm able to get that screw out, still with some difficulty. Yeah, so this is not a good way to fasten a standoff to a circuit board, particularly if you then go ahead and put red paint or sealant, you know, where the screw comes through. So you need, you know, a good amount of force to break that and unscrew it. You're going to wind up having this spinning freely. So because these are no longer adequately fastened to the circuit board, these particular standoffs I'm going to have to replace with new standoffs, so the board can be fastened to the case and removed in the future. Here are the circuit boards from the Mark III ARP Odyssey. Really the only difference between the Mark II in this case is the board A. It's still an A2 board, but down here, because we have the proportional pitch control, we have a connector and some other components instead of the pitch bend knob. There's also this wire that goes off and delivers delivers some current to the LED power indicator on the right side of the key bed. But otherwise, board B and board C are the same. This one also has a 4075 filter, and 4075 filters is typically what I would expect to see in a Mark III Odyssey. Again, generally the 4035 would be in the Mark II, but in this case, ours had a 4075. So what I'll do is actually I'll put the Mark II and the Mark III boards side by side. So here are the boards for the Mark II in the front and the Mark III in the back. And again, the only difference that you're going to notice is the proportional pitch control and pitch bend section here on board A. Otherwise, they're identical and will sound identical, assuming they're calibrated the same. I'd be remiss if I didn't put the Revision 1 boards next to the Revision 2 boards. So here in the back we've got the white Mark I Odyssey, and in the front we have the black and gold Mark II Odyssey. So you can see that there's differences on all the boards. The Revision 1 board A has a 3-bus keyboard with so there's an extra wire that goes to the trigger bus. The oscillators are different between Revision 1 and Revision 2, and the filters are different between Revision 1 and Revision 2. So I would expect to hear differences in the sound in pretty much all aspects of the Mark I and Mark II ARP Odyssey. Now that we've got the 4 synthesizers torn down, it looks like this is going to be a good place to break this installment of the video, and we'll pick up here where we left off in the next installment. So I hope you join me for that. I'm Synthchaser from synthchaser.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.